Hello, welcome everybody to the Web3 Business Show, brought to you by Token Minds. As usual, we're providing content for you guys for and by crypto industry experts. My name is Rob, and today my guest is Stefan from Truflation, which is an app chain providing indexes on real-world assets. Welcome, Stefan.
Yeah, thank you, Robbie, and great to be here. And thanks for the listeners to actually take out time and spend your valuable single resource that does not get replenished time to listen to what we're going to talk about today.
Well said. Right back at you, Stefan. It's been a little thing to organize this. So I'm super happy to have you here. You mentioned before the podcast, right, that you have been in crypto for quite a while now. Can you maybe just quickly summarize your journey, and also how did you eventually then end up with starting Truflation?
Yeah, so I'm a serial entrepreneur. I started my first business in mobile networks in China, and launched that and sold that to China Unicom, leading to getting deeper into not the network side, but actually the software side of phones, with Sun Microsystems, working on Java virtual machines that would then run and enable applications on mobile phones. Growing that business resulted in then leading and setting up my own developer agency. I was a really big believer in the need to acquire and build developer ecosystems to write and scale and support the scale of your platform. That platform in those days was the iPhone that was launched in 2007. So I launched a developer agency in 2007. And we were working with all the big tech companies, helping them grow and promote their SDKs, as well as their APIs and their operating systems, and trying to get developers to build to those. One of the developers wanted to get paid in Bitcoin in about 2012. So, wow, I sort of looked into that and didn't know much about it. And that's when I sort of bought my first Bitcoin. Didn't really realize too much about it. It was like such a shitty user experience. I had to go to my network because the wallet was a self-custody wallet and it was built in Java. So then I leveraged my network to sort of understand where I could go to buy Bitcoin, how I could buy it using PayPal and using eBay to buy my actual first Bitcoin. But that said, didn't think much about it. 9 months later, the developer wanted to get paid, and then the price had gone from $5 to $300, and it's like, wow. And so I was paying him in US dollars, denominated in US dollars on the other side of the planet. So all of a sudden, it was much cheaper to engage with that developer. But what really got me, and it was the fact that I could transfer the money instantaneously on a peer-to-peer basis without any middlemen at no costs. Because in those times, the network wasn't congested. It was instantaneously via Skype call, on the other side of the planet. And it was just amazing. And that to me was just, wow, I can pay everybody on a peer-to-peer, no bank, no 3 days, 7 days, remittance and settlement between the two parties, no forms to fill out, no costs. I mean, the banks were charging you $700 to wire money to somewhere else in the world. And it was just like, and that still exists today. It's still so difficult to wire money from a bank to a bank account, which doesn't make any sense to me, whereas crypto has been peer-to-peer. And then I got down the rabbit hole. I became CEO of Bitcoin.com. I ran that, scaled that to 20 million wallets and about 500,000 merchants, where you could actually pay instantaneously, settled with the merchant instantaneously at a fraction of the fees to what they were paying when they used credit cards. And when they used credit cards, they had to wait a 30-day settlement time. The only thing that they didn't like was the volatility and of a Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash or Ethereum at the time, which we enabled payments for. So stable coins was a real big use case. Then the government shut everything down. COVID came, printed lots of money, trillions of dollars, but then told us inflation is transitory. And what is inflation, right? You can view it as a hidden tax, but really it's a debasement of your savings. And so what does that mean? That means your purchasing power drops. And if you look under the carpet in terms of how governments calculate inflation, this is 30x improvement that we can do on this. No doubt about it. Taking a developer mindset and taking that opportunity and building on that. And so that's what we did. And we launched about 3 years ago. Today, we have some 200,000 active users. We are quoted across multiple different macro experts that are using Truflation as the alternative source of truth in contrast to what the government tells us. It was great timing because the market also has started to feel the trust in government has started to drop. Their ability to relate to the common people was just going really quickly out the window. And so that enabled us to come in and provide a new truth, independent, transparent, real-time, and immutable and censorship-resistant. So all those elements people really liked, and that resonated with everybody. And that's sort of where we are today, where we are now launching multiple different indexes. We have inflation in multiple different countries. We're about to launch in another 6 countries at the rest of this year. And we're not building all of this now. We have identified core partners that want to work with the Truflation network and build out these indexes. And so we're working with them to help create inflation calculators for their nationalities and their nations, as well as building out other indexes as they tap into all of the data that has been captured for the calculation of inflation.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's amazing. And I think it's, what you're mentioning, right? Well, first of all, apart from your journey where you're mentioning how you get to Truflation, right? In terms of the inflation issue, you mentioned also buying Bitcoin through PayPal. That was also, I think that was a very short-lived thing until people found out that you can do chargebacks on PayPal.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, what you're saying, so you're basically, you're on a mission, basically what initially Bitcoin was built for like truly decentralized finance, truly permissionless finance. Whereas, during your journey, basically you found out some issues with the volatility, with the adoption, even blocking of stable coins by the government, and you came up with the biggest problem that is there for the common man in terms of finances, which is inflation. Then the jump there, right? What you're mentioning, from your perspective, obviously, I think in crypto, if inflation can be solved, let's say you can buy an inflation protection through crypto, through a coin, that you're basically providing the infrastructure for that, or how do you see that? Like, how can the common man benefit from what you're building, basically?
So we're building 2 things. One is we're building the infrastructure on the blockchain, where think of it sort of as a decentralized Bloomberg meets Akamai, where I have the streaming network capability of Akamai on a decentralized basis. And then I have this Bloomberg with all of this financial and economic data. And what we're trying to do is democratize that access to all of that financial and economic data. We have some 80, maybe 100 now data providers that are connected to the Truflation Stream network. And we have a number of different analytical firms that are building indexes using that data, more from a data engineering or financial engineering perspective. And then we have the consumption of that aspect, right? So instead of having one terminal or one dashboard that you can access it by, it can be accessible as a data stream on multiple different blockchains and hundreds and thousands of different dApps that are building on those blockchains. And it's also available as a simple data feed, so you can just download it as an API and integrate it into your spreadsheets, onto your web page, which is what Truflation.com resembles. What we do is we pull as much of the data as we possibly can to present it in a visual fashion on Truflation.com, so people can interact with it, play around with it, and we're now beginning to make sure that we can distribute a lot of those feeds onto traditional platforms where people go, e.g., and we'll share more around that as the protocol begins to evolve. But yeah, there'll be a much more available in different interfaces, so not just on one website, but on dApps, across different blockchains, and on other websites as well.
Right, that's amazing, because most likely people really feel inflation, but they don't really have the real numbers. That's what you're providing. And is it also a permissionless way? You're building obviously on blockchain infrastructure, so anybody that wants to get access to this data will be able to get access.
Yep. I mean, that's already permissionless. So anybody that wants to get access, if you want more data and you want deeper data, there is sort of a cost to sustain this network, but it's $12. I mean, for $12 equivalent, you can actually purchase the data and subscribe to it, and you get all the historical data. If you want to be able to manipulate and play around with the data, then it's a bit more expensive, right? I think it's like a bit, but then you're a professional. You're monetizing the data itself and leveraging this as an analyst or as a professional investor. But for the basic fee, it's like $12. Otherwise, everything else is for free. And then if you're a protocol building stuff and using it, then there's a different pricing aspect to it. But yeah, we want to make this available for free. It's permissionless on that side. We do at the beginning are still a bit more permissioned around the data, because we want to ensure quality data is there and reliability. And so there's a whole authentication, verification, and consensus algorithm in place to ensure that we have the quality that you would expect from making investment decisions based on research and data that you are going to extract from the Truflation Stream network.
And from, so it's all kind of verifiable that you're focusing on that part. And going forward, what I understand from you as well, that this is going to be actually critical, right, for people's investment decisions because of the inflation being, what do you expect actually for the next few years? Because we already had high inflation. How long do you think this will continue in your estimation?
I mean, there are varying opinions, right? I mean, inflation, according to Truflation, and inflation, remember, is a measurement on year basis. So I'm looking at the cost evolution this year compared to the same time a year ago of how the prices were, right? And so if you go to Truflation.com, you're in the US, you're looking at 1.5% inflation for the same time last year. But if you look at it on an aggregated basis, you're losing 25%, a quarter of your purchasing power over the last 3 years. So that's a significant loss in purchasing power, especially if you live paycheck to paycheck. In the UK, it's 40%. Right? So 40% of your purchase, nearly half of your purchasing power is gone. And at the same time, wage increase in the UK since 2010 has only increased 20%. The average wage increase. So since 2010 to 2024, we've had about a 20% wage increase, whereas the cost of goods all around you has increased in the last 3 years alone by 40%.
That is insane. Yeah, that is.
And so then people blame social media for, it's all social media's fault for the people not being happy and the riots and the upsets and you can't blame that on social media. I think the bigger issue is there's a fundamental systemic problem that we have in how nations are run. And we need to try and innovate our way out of this by creating new systems that can enable a lightweight framework that enables providing the right kind of data and the right kind of systems to operate harmoniously across nations, right? And around the world, to be honest, as well, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think those numbers you're saying, I think a lot of people are feeding them, but they're not being transparently communicated, right? So you're mentioning the government data, right? What would be some of the main differences between how they calculate it and the real inflation that you're providing?
So number one is, I mean, it varies, right? So we got it in the US and in the UK, and in the US the government that manages the distribution of data is inflation is the government entities called the Bureau of Labour and Statistics, the BLS. In the UK, it's the Office of National Statistics, which is the ONS. And so they do it differently. The way we do it differently, number one, is we build it from the bottom up. We capture pricing from the bottom up. We leverage APIs, we do web scraping, we do crowdsourcing, we tap into scanners, price scanners, barcodes, etc., etc. And so that's how we pull our data together. We have 80 million items that we track versus the government that tracks 80,000 items. So there's a big difference in terms of attracting pricing data. We have 12 categories that we track. The government only has 6 categories. And so if I look at those elements, there's a difference across that. And then ultimately, we do it every single day. We update our metrics. So they may change a bit more, but you have high frequency insights in terms of what and where a market may be going. The government updates it once a month, and they change their methodology when they deem it necessary to change. You saw that at the beginning of the year, the government changed their methodology. And then ultimately it takes 1-2 months to be able to calibrate how they do it, what's different, why is it different? And so it just is less transparent. And so how do we make it more transparent so people have better insights? And ultimately, if you think about the compounding effect of your investments and interest rates, for example, super easy to understand that if I earn 10 cents on my dollar, that $1.10 is going to be earning another 11 cents on that. So that's the whole compounding effect. And if you have that with inflation information and can make investment decisions based on that higher frequency, you're going to be able to have a better return ultimately on investing associated with yield and cost of capital.
Yeah, exactly. You can be ahead basically on this government, decisions, and yeah, that's interesting. And what you're mentioning also about the complexity of inflation, having so many data points.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, people feel it, but it's hidden in many cases as well, somewhere in the supply chain, because a lot of times things get more expensive, but you just get a cheaper final product in the end. So it's plus some of the inflated prices are delayed, right? Like you talk about rental contracts or things that are not instantly updated, but you're definitely going to feel those things. And what is
Yeah, I mean, we also work very closely with universities to try and innovate on the methodologies. So we come up with innovations and solutions, and then we identify a university that's specialized in housing market, where we work with Penn State, or we worked with the Stockholm University of Economics, where we identified the importance of high frequency data, things like that, so that we can then validate and make sure that it's not just us thinking of a new data set and a new way of calculating it, but actually having that validated with established institutions and economic thought process that to underlie the foundations of where we think it needs to go.
Yeah, and in terms of like simplifying the process, right, in this bigger battle of inflation, let's say, where you're doing a big part with the data, that's probably the main fundamentals of solving this problem. But you also mentioned that will basically direct you to making the right investment decisions. Do you foresee in the future for the common man, let's say, out there, how to make that part also potentially easier, right? Using the data and then to fight inflation with the right investment allocations?
Yeah, I mean that's sort of what we want to do. How can we identify ways to help you protect yourself against the growing prices of consumer products? But then also, how can we help identify areas to not only help you protect yourself against consumer prices, but also asset prices? Because there's a big difference between inflation on consumer prices, your eggs, your transportation costs, your rent, etc., versus the house that you want to buy, the stocks you want to buy, in terms of enabling you to get onto the wealth growing ladder, right? How do we enable that on ramp and simplify that on ramp? And we see what's happening in decentralized finance is a lot of these products are all of a sudden becoming more accessible to many new participants that haven't been able to access a lot of these products in the past. And I think that is a critical component to it. And how do we empower these builders, both from a financial and a software perspective, to create and make available such products to the 1 to 2 billion people that don't actually have access to be able to grow their wealth and get onto the ladder, especially new people coming into the market, the next generations.
Yeah, so this is more maybe also partially a call to builders out there in the crypto space. Try to use a Truflation to actually build your kind of inflation protection application. So that's amazing. So the last question from my side for this episode is what I asked all of the founders, entrepreneurs in the space. You are on a gigantic mission. You chose one of the biggest missions of our lifetime right now. I'm sure you encounter a lot of challenges, a lot of issues. How do you overcome that? Do you have tips for other people that might want to take these kind of challenges, or things you learned that you maybe can share with fellow founders and entrepreneurs in the space?
Look, I mean, it's an amazing journey being an entrepreneur, but it's a lot of sacrifice. It's a lot of people think, oh, I'll just do a startup, it'll be fun and easy, right? I mean, to build a scalable solution requires a lot of commitment, dedication, persistence, tenacity, and sacrifice, right? I mean, where people on Friday evening, they go out for drinks and meet each other at the pub. You're there working on a Friday night till midnight, hacking out the final piece of code, or finishing that white paper, or getting the proposal out to the customer, or solving a crash. On Saturday, your customer call or your system, your software goes down. What do you got to do? You can't just say, oh, not my fault, hang it up, leave it to somebody else. No, it is your fault, because you are a part of a small team trying to grow a business and keep your users happy. And so to that extent, you're going to get up at 3 a.m. on a Saturday night and then start fixing the code and working with the team that's on the other end of the planet, if you're not in the same office, to try and fix it and resolve it. And those are things that you don't necessarily see. It's not just going to conferences, having parties and shaking hands. It's a lot of work and building, which is required in the early days. And then once you've got your processes up and running, new challenges come in, right? It's not always those challenges. It's going to be a whole different, it's going to be political challenges, regulatory challenges, compliance challenges, competitive challenges that enter into the market once you then get yourself more established. So the journey is a long one. It's not overnight in 3 days and boom, you're on top of the world. It's generally 20 years of commitment and dedication, and you see that in the likes of a Tesla or a SpaceX or an Nvidia. All of these companies took years to build and really scale. The Facebooks of the world are slightly an anomaly, right? They're not the common practice. And if you look at even Uber, I mean, it took 5 years to really go as hard as they did 24/7 to really build that product. only to then get crushed by regulatory burdens and hurdles and compliance issues, which then took on the next level of commitment and resources and type of personalities to take it to that next level. But that's really all that I can say. Just always expect the unexpected and love the unexpected.
Wow, that's amazing. It's almost a little bit slightly heroic, right? The entrepreneurial journey. You really have to fight some battles there and be ready for it. It's not something that requires a lot of character and a lot of dedication and
thick skin.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Amazing.
And the amazing thing to me was actually, one thing that I never really understood was, at the beginning you get, maybe if it's easier to get friends and family to support you and back you because they're all behind you, they're close-ins, but the amount of no's you are confronted with, people that are not believers and don't buy into your plan and vision, that to me was the hardest thing. It's each time you get another no, another no, another no, another no, and it's just constantly no, and it just is very demoralizing. And how do you get up the next day and convince yourself, my business plan is the right plan, it's the right thing, I'm going to continue down this path, and then you'll get a yes, and that yes is just, it's just, you're on such a high. I think that's one thing I never really appreciated, the amount of no's you get and the amount of no's you need to deal with, and how that puts your mission, vision, you start to question that ultimately, right? I mean, if everybody's telling you no, you by nature are going to start questioning that, and then how do you stay true to it or consistent? Maybe adapt it a little bit, but that's the advantage as a startup. You're much more agile, so you can change it. Markets change really fast, and you do need to adapt, but you have to have a core vision and mission that's solid. And that you want to pursue. How you get there is always going to change. It's never a straight line.
Absolutely, man. A lot of very valuable wisdom in there for sure. It's kind of you mentioned Facebook. I actually remember at some point that Mark Zuckerberg said that as well. That when you start a business, you literally rely on your vision because the data isn't there. There is no real proof why this should work, because otherwise it wouldn't be a new idea, it wouldn't be innovative. So you're literally going on your instinct, on your trust, your faith, your vision, and that gets tested an insane amount of time, and you need to get another thing that you need some character for. So thank you so much, Stefan. Really appreciate it. An exciting conversation, and hopefully maybe someday we can do it again. In the meantime, I'm gonna for sure follow Truflation. I'm gonna recommend everybody to do the same, connect to you on all the socials, and hopefully we can do this again. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Robbie, and glad you enjoyed it, and look forward to please do follow Truflation. We're on Telegram, Twitter, on the website truflation.com, Truflation, so no E. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and thank you for listening. Goodbye.